Hey everyone.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you all?
Pretty good.
Everyone's here. Yeah, Ella was not going to be here this week or next, so we should be good to get started. Jeremiah?
Think you're muted.
I'm double muted, sorry. Okay, so we'll start with demos. Which group wants to go first?
Amelia and I can go first. Question though, because I missed last week, but the first week we did the demo from the deployed. Oh wait, okay, never mind. It's working now. I was looking at it earlier and it wasn't working correctly. Okay, it's fine. Never mind. Disregard that. Okay, so I will do the demo of what all the UI looks like, and then Emilio will talk about the code. So I'll just share my screen. Oh, I think someone needs to allow screen sharing.
Every time. Should be good now.
Yeah, okay, awesome. Let me just. Okay, can everyone see that okay? Okay, awesome. Okay, so what Emilio and I implemented is on the list page here, you're able to search for an item that you've added to your list. And it will match any like sequence of letters. So you can start with the first letter, or for like frosted flakes, you could start with the FL. You could even do like frosted. It's not case sensitive, so you can type in lowercase or uppercase. And then we've also implemented a button here so that you can clear the list. I'm trying to think what else. We were running into an issue that, well, we weren't running into an issue, but Allo brought up that when he searched for banana with a capital B, it wasn't coming up. And it was just how we had the code set up. Some of the items that were already in the database, or like when the user was typing them in, they were going into the database in whatever casing that the user typed them in. So we also made a change that they'll always be sent in as lowercase to the database. And they're also just being shown as lowercase here, but we could easily just, I mean, I think it looks a little nicer to capitalize the first letter, but you would still be able to search for them in any casing because of how they're stored in the database. Yeah, that's what we implemented, and you can use, we have the label that works correctly, and you can tab over to the button. So from an accessibility standpoint, it also works. So yeah, I'll pass it over to Emilio. I think that's all I have.
Thanks, Hannah. Okay. Sharing screen. Code. Okay. All right. So as Hannah explained, we had to add a form in the list view to allow users to search through a grocery list. And we accomplished that by using a filter function by grocery name. so that if a grocery name contains a piece of the user's input text, then the item would appear on the user screen. So here we have the list component, and to manage state based upon the user's text input in our form, we declared a state variable named search to reflect the user's input. And as far as the code for our form, I'll go straight to the actual form, which calls a series of functions that I'll explain as we go through the code throughout the form. So first, we added a handle submit function that uses a prevent default method to prevent the form's default action of submitting the user's input. We also included a label entitled search for the user's text input field. And we added inside the actual input element an onChange function that awaits the text input by the user, so that as the user types in the input field, our handle change function is called, which sets the value of the search state variable to that user's input. We also added a button that clears the user's input by setting the search state variable to an empty string. And finally, we added a map function to iterate through the filtered data by each grocery item's name. So so the function displays the grocery items names that are included in the text typed by the user and performs that filtration according to the lowercase format of the user's input. So as shown here, this is the filter function, and the lowercase toLowercase method is applied here so that regardless of the case of the user's input, it will be treated as a lowercase format for the search. Hannah and I initially had a bug where we couldn't properly filter grocery item names in uppercase format, which she referenced. And to fix this, we implemented a toLowercase method here in Firebase JS to make the grocery item name lowercase after the user inputs the name. So regardless of the case format, let's say the user's typing in uppercase, it would create, the item name would be created with lowercase format, which then allows our filter function in the front end to work properly. So that concludes our code walkthrough.
Yeah, looks good. And you talked about the main issue was just like the casing. Were there any other issues you ran into when you were, or anything you thought was notable?
Apart from the casing issue, there weren't any other major bugs unless unless I'm missing one, but we did also make 2 corrections to the code that that Jeremiah did point out in his review. So for example, putting library components, or like library imports, above imports of components is something stylistic that should be done. So that's one correction that we made to the code. And then the other correction was adding a type for the button, which we did not do. And as Jeremiah explained, the default action of the button is to submit. So the type should be included. So we did also fix that.
Very cool. Nice work. And then Steffi, are you ready?
I'm ready, thank you. Share screen. I think I got the correct ones. Can you guys see my screen? I'm very nervous. I just want to say that now, so if I'm like weird. Okay, so I've opened up the app from the brief link at the top. So this is the most up-to-date version. I'm going to sign out and sign back in just to show it from full functionality. First thing that our app was supposed to do was be able to take a user's list and share it with somebody that's in the database. So we first need to choose a list that we want to share. We had come up with a couple different issues on the way, and I'll talk about that. So first I'll try to share a list, and I will use an email that doesn't exist. Oh, yeah, first, sorry about that. So on our once we click the list that we're going to try to share, we go to our manage list page, and we added a button here so that we can invite. Once we click it, our little form will pop up. It asks us to enter the email of the person that we want to invite. So first I'll try adding a person that doesn't exist in the database. Say my friend, this is my friend's email. Invite them to the list. It tells us you're not the owner of the list, only an owner can share the list. So that was one of the issues that we came up with, where we were trying to share a list that wasn't ours. It seems like that becomes the first, which we didn't run into during our initial testing. That alert becomes the first alert, which we might need to change or look at. Instead of it alerting first that user doesn't exist, it first alert that we didn't share, that we don't own the list. So if I go to a list that I do own, I invite again, and I try my friend here. When I invite them, it says the user's not found. I think we should probably look into making sure that this is the first response, which I'm glad we just found that. Okay, so we kind of saw both of those issues in one, both of the problems in one. It looks like we do need to look into that a little bit. And then if I try to share, I'm going to grab an email real quick from one of you guys. Here we go. Let's see. I'm going to try yours, Jeremiah, because you were our tester or our reviewer. So if I try to invite you to my hamster list, it says, yay, our list has been shared or has been invited. Now we can check in the database whether or not our list was actually indeed shared. I'm just going to refresh it to make sure that it shows up. If I go to Jeremiah over here, we can see he does not have the list. Is it over here?
Yeah, you were just on it.
This one. Oh yeah, here we go. Okay, so now Jeremiah has hamster. So yeah, it seems like I did find just a little issue right there, which I'll be happy that we need to look into. But we can move on to the next portion. So my code here. Let's see. Need to get this out of the way. How do I hide this? Okay. So we started out in app. We are going to use the list path, so it gets passed down into our manage list route. Then on manage list, we have our list path here. We ended up deciding to create a modal window to hold our form. And so the modal component has this state management function to set the open to true or to false so that we can use the form or not. We pass close modal into the invite form so that we can manage that inside the form. Sorry, my little The modal is pretty simple. We have a close button. On click, it closes. We have a couple different boxes just to hold it, and then the children prop, which allows us to add the form to it. Then the form is where we have most of our functionality. Initially, we had just built the form and thrown it into the manage list component. Our first issue came up when we were trying to implement the enter button. When manage list had two forms in it, initially it had this add list form and this invite form, and it didn't know which list to submit when we pushed enter. So we had to figure out how to make that work. We had come up with the idea of the modal because I think in our mind, the UI would be nice if there was just like a little icon at the top that said like invite a friend. You could click that and just a simple window would pop up where you type in and enter an email, and then it kind of goes away. So that was our kind of logic with creating this modal. And we thought that we would probably use that component like later on too. So it was a probable use case where we would use it again. So our invite form ended up needing to be removed from the manage list component. There were, let's see, the other issue we had, we were finding an issue when we just set our alert on the front end. We had, put our try, our catch block, and had said like alert that, whatever happened worked. And it wasn't lining up well with, if we put an incorrect email, it was telling us that the list was added, but the back end we weren't able to communicate what was going on with the back end. So we ended up coming into the Firebase back end, which is our share list function here. And we ended up adding alerts to the back end. Once we did that, we were able to get the messages that we wanted. And it was working pretty well. Let's see, another little thing that we had to figure out was how to get the user ID so that we could check whether or not that person existed or not. So we use this use auth hook that was supplied for us. That would allow us to look at who was signed in. So then after review, we had a couple of issues. The alerts that we were using, we needed to be on the front end. We needed to have our alert on the front end, but we needed to have the back end telling us what was going on. Jeremiah helped us to figure out how to do that. So we ended up adding our messages to the return statement of each if block, depending on what was going on. And then in our invite form, we could alert them of the message. So whichever if block passed through the Firebase, it would tell us what the message was. We ended up then clearing the input and closing the modal. Our form was pretty standard, the same as the previous ones. We had on submit, we had our button type submit. We had, this was another little issue. We were trying to figure out how to get our input value, and originally we thought we had to match the recipient email, which comes from Firebase. Up here, recipient email. So when we first built our form, we had this complicated object, and it was grabbing recipient email, input.recipient email when we created our input. But then once we had figured out, once we had figured all the other bugs out, it was simple to just change it into a string. And it worked to use the string and then just use input as our value, as whatever the user was typing in. There was another discussion about the modal. During the review, Jeremiah had the idea of using the dialog box for simplicity. HTML provides a tag that will be a non-modal or a modal. And we kind of decided to stay with the modal component because we wanted to be able to style it more in the future. And then also the idea that we would probably use it again. Let's see, I think that's it. Did you guys have any questions, or did I cover everything?
No questions. Looks good. The only thing I really have to say is something interesting happened when you clicked to add to the list. I think Zoom isn't capturing the dialogue that pops up or the alert that pops up, but
Oh, the alert. Oh, I see.
yeah, but you read it out to us, so anyone who's interested in what that looks like who hasn't tried it can go try it if they want to. Um yeah, and then for the like order of the error messages,
Yeah.
like I'm not really sure which one would be like more I guess like frustrating as a user. Like if you try to share a list with someone who's not a user and it says you aren't the owner of the list, then that's always going to be true. Versus like if you get the user's not found and then you get your friend to sign up and then you find out you're not the owner of the list.
Hmm.
Um might
Good point.
might make more sense this way. But another option is just like showing both of those messages like in the future when using a modal or a like a toaster snack bar or something Aloe and I talked about.
Yeah,
So
that's a good point. Thanks for bringing that up. I don't know which one would, but they would probably both be annoying.
yeah. Yeah, and there's always that like you fix one thing and then you find out there's another thing. So
Mhm.
um yeah, I don't have any questions. Nice work and good job doing it solo.
Yeah, thanks. My heart is like, ah,
No, you did a good job.
thank you guys.
And then I think I'm gonna pass it to Danielle to do issues.
Yeah, I can do that. My thing up here. Maybe. Yeah, I have the right screen shared. Awesome. Let's get the right issue up. I'll start with issue 8, which is Amelia and Aloe this week. This is, as a user, I want to see a welcoming prompt to add my first item to my list if the list is empty to help me get oriented on how the app works. So the thought behind this one is when you create a new list, there aren't any items. So for this one, I probably would recommend just conditionally rendering a message, a helpful message of like, get started adding your first item here. And then part of the acceptance criteria is also a button, it looks like. So keep that in mind. Any questions on that one before I move on to the second one?
No questions. Thank you.
Cool. Then this one seems a little more challenging than the other one. So lucky Steffi and Hannah. Still doable though. So it's as a user, I'm going to mark an item on my shopping list as purchased so the app can learn how often I buy different things. So the essence of this one is the list item component will now have a checkbox with the semantic label. And then the person can check that box. I'm trying to think if unchecking is part of it too. No, I don't see anything about unchecking, but the person can check the box and then you'll have to add something in to update date last purchased and total purchases properties on the corresponding Firestore document. Here it is. Okay. Yeah, I lied. Point 3 here is if the item is shown as checked for 24 hours after the purchase date is made, then you'll need to have the item uncheck itself. So that one's fun to figure out. Trying to think what else here. Yeah, and then there's some tips here on the bottom. This one involves a little more like hands-on of going through the Firestore console. So like, don't be afraid to add stuff. If you end up like adding junk, you can always go in there and delete it too. So definitely keep that in mind. One thought for this one might be like you create your own list and then you're only worried about polluting that one list if you're concerned about touching other people's lists. It's probably how I would approach it, but totally up to you, whatever works best for the two of you. So, any questions on this one?
I guess my question is, so like we're obviously gonna be having to work with dates. Are we, I guess we should just try to do that without using any kind of library? Like, is it maybe straightforward enough that you wouldn't need a library? Because I've worked with dates before in like more complex ways, and it's just like I just always use a library, but this maybe is simple enough that that's not necessary.
Let's see. Yeah, I'm wondering here. Does this get future date? Oh, yeah, I wonder if this is the one that we need to use this get future date. Library, potentially. Let me look at that real quick. Yeah, there is this, that's a fantastic question, by the way, because dates are almost always an issue. I'm doing something at work where someone thought it was a good idea to make everything Eastern time. And that doesn't work well when there's locations not in Eastern time. But anyway, yeah, I think I probably would check out this utils folder. There is a get future date. I think it's under dates. Yeah, I probably would imitate what's here. But if that doesn't like fully answer your question, once you're like more into the weeds, definitely reach out. Yeah, it looks like we're just using this straight up JavaScript date to keep it simple.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
And then I think the only other thing that's weird is in the way Firestore works, it doesn't save it directly as a JavaScript date, so you have to figure out how to convert it back to one. But it's not really hard to do. It's just like in kind of a weird format when you get it back from Firebase.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Oh yeah, that's a great point too. That definitely tripped me up doing this. But awesome. I guess next is going to be talking about the reading the video that you all had to watch about selling yourself. So I guess we can roll into that conversation.
Yeah, so I think the learning module this week was about selling yourself in interviews, and there was the video that went along with it, which was it looked like it was just a recording from a previous Career Lab session. So I guess I can just open it up to anyone have any questions about it, thoughts about talking about yourself in interviews in general, or specific stuff from the video.
I think one thing or something that kind of I'm not sure about is like how much like whenever I see like things on the internet or Instagram or whatever, like you have to specifically say how what you did in your role previously, might have like showed you were a leader, showed you advanced sales or whatever, like the things that jobs are looking for. How do we like translate that when we don't have previous experience? Like what did you guys do for your first job when you couldn't say like in a tech role I did this? Like based on your past experience outside of that kind of role.
I would say that I would say emphasize talking about your experience that is relevant, for example, doing this program. But as far as bringing stuff in from a previous like non-tech role, I definitely had interviews and talked about my old non coding job. I would say I would say I tried to not talk about it very much. It's good if you can get like maybe one kind of nugget of something that you can apply, but in general, if you're in a role that really doesn't have a lot of relevance to what you're trying to do, I would try to not talk about it as much. I don't know if anyone else has thoughts.
Yeah, I'll chime in. That's a great question. Yeah, I kind of had the same thoughts and issues. I wonder, and this is like my bias, so you can choose to not listen to it or not, but sometimes I kind of wonder when interviewers ask about like prior leadership experience, if they're not really asking about leadership, if they're more just asking about like examples of where you took the initiative. Like, can you show that you're a self-starter? So maybe answer it that way. Like, even if you don't have like leadership title, like I know that you all have taken initiative by joining this this program, and even like what you demoed earlier, Steffi, with like the modal, like that wasn't part of the requirements, but you were like, this is a better way to set us on a path going forward. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe thinking about it that way might help kind of give you more ideas of examples.
I would also say just try and keep things like that, or try and just practice it of whatever the element from that previous job you're bringing, and try to get it to where you can talk about it in a really concise way. Because one thing in interviews I had that didn't go well, I think like one of the things that would hurt me is I would trying to talk about something from my old job and going into like too much detail of like stuff that wasn't super relevant, and just kind of like wasting time in the interview. So uh it can be useful to talk about something like that, but just practice it and try and get it down to something that you can explain like really quickly and in a way that makes sense.
That's really good input. Thanks, you guys.
Any other thoughts about the module or the topic?
I have a question. First of all, I thought it was a good watch just because I think it's important how you sell yourself. I used to work with a guy because I taught CrossFit classes and did personal training, and he was like, everyone thought he knew so much just because he was so confident in himself, but he, like, definitely, like, didn't even know the least out of everyone there, but like he was just really good at selling himself and like telling a story. So I learned the power of that there, and that, knowing him. But I guess my question is, so for me personally, what kind of was the catalyst for me getting into software development was I had a really bad concussion and I had to stop working just because I had such a physical job and there was lots of like loud music and lights and that kind of stuff. And so one of the reasons why I wanted to get into software engineering was that, good money, like a stable job, like all of those things. And I'm just wondering, like, should I not say that in an interview if someone's asking me, like, what prompted you to get into this? Like, it's obviously not the main reason, but it was really a huge catalyst for me. It's like, well, I wasn't making any money. I couldn't work at all, and I wanted something more stable for myself. I just don't know if that makes me sound like desperate, even though I'm sure a lot of people get into it because it's stable and all that stuff. But like maybe they just don't say that. I don't know what maybe like thoughts on that is.
I think I tried to avoid talking about stuff like that. Yeah, I think um I think if you're asked directly about it, like you can, there's no need to like hide that that's part of your motivation. But I think that you should lead with like, what about it interested you? Because they don't want to think that you don't even that you don't really have an interest in it and like it, and you just want to do it like just to do a job. And like I'm a person that's sort of I think that it's bad that that some employers think that everyone needs to be like passionate about their work, and I don't think you need to do that, but I think that just speak honestly about what things you found interesting about it when you started checking it out and learning about it. What things, what feels good about doing the work, or what feels satisfying. Um, I think are better things to lead with than like fundamentals of like wanting to make a good salary and be stable, because those are also things that everyone wants, and so you're not really like differentiating yourself in any way with that.
Yeah, for sure. I guess I just thought about it because when I think about like what my story is, like that was such a huge part of my story. Like I probably wouldn't have considered it if I wasn't off for so long thinking about, like where do I want to go? What do I want to do? Like this is maybe not working for me anymore. But I obviously do really enjoy it and I enjoy the problem solving and aspects of it. But yeah, I guess just like mentioning that at all was kind of my thought, because when I'm thinking about like telling my story, it's like part of it, but it's like maybe I should leave that part out, or like you're saying, it should just be like like a, oh, like I would love financial stability, but like not make that the focus.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, in the context of honestly, like the way you just said it, I think is good. Yeah, but just don't necessarily like lead with it.
Yeah.
If I hope that makes sense.
Yeah.
I pretty much had the same like kinds of like concerns that Stephanie had about, like describing like experiences in the job interview setting. I guess like yeah, I guess for me it's like one of the things that I like wonder about in the job interview setting is like is it is it better to um is it better to share stories related to like the whatever tech experience I have, or like just like share experiences, or like focus on experiences um from my previous job in the legal field? Because like I have like I have more tangible I have more accomplishments that I can think of more readily because I actually did that professionally in the legal field. Um, but okay, here's my question. Like, if someone were to ask me, what is your greatest like professional achievement, or personal achievement? Like, there are a number of things that I could say, like related to what I did in my legal career, but I also don't want to come off as like, I don't want it to come off as like, okay, all this guy has talked about for most of this interview is like his legal career. Like I was asked once, like, what's your proudest like personal and professional accomplishment? And I said, well, like it was becoming a lawyer because I had wanted to do that for years. And um, I'm a first generation college student, like, so all of that was like, that was like, I guess I would consider that my proudest professional achievement. Um, but at the same time, like, I think after I said it, and I didn't get any bad vibes from the interviewer, but after I said it, I started wondering, like, is that what I should be going with for those types of questions?
Yeah, it can be tough because, um, like you said, you do have this professional background, and that is where your professional accomplishments lie, thus far. Um, I would not like, for that specific kind of question, I think that's okay to say what you did. But just be cognizant of trying to think of these types of questions and think of how you can, think of answers that relate to um, software development, or your learning journey, like doing what you're doing now, trying to teach yourself a new skill, and break into a new field. That's very challenging. Um, so, and a lot of times it's also not necessarily about um, mentioning certain things or not, but if the way the sort of like delivery of it, um, and like practicing having, being able to answer a question like that in like a concise way that's memorable to the person interviewing you, I think is honestly sometimes more important than like what you're actually talking about, right? Um, and yeah, I couldn't really tell you why like people ask questions like that. I find that kind of an odd question. It sounds like someone that like didn't know what to ask the candidate, and they like, that's the other thing you have to think about is like people giving interviews, like sometimes they don't really know what they're doing, right? Um, I can tell you, like, on my own team, if we were interviewing someone, like we would not ask something like that. Um, so it is something you have to like prepare for, unfortunately, especially in a round with like, that sounds something that more of like maybe an HR person would ask.
It was.
Yeah, so try and lean into like programming stuff as much as possible, but also just think about that what is sometimes more important than, you know, the content of your answer is like the delivery. And sometimes I think like they ask questions like that just to see if you cared enough to prepare for the interview, right? So like having a good sort of elevator pitch prepared answer is a way for them to see like, okay, they cared enough to prepare for this. That's another, you know, possible reason they could be asking that. So, but I'm not, you know, super qualified. This is just kind of my opinion. That might be a good question to pose to like the wider Slack group, to see if others have thoughts.
Thanks.
Stephanie.
What your response just made me wonder, like, do you guys, could each of you guys give us like an example question that you would ask someone if you were hiring for like your team? Like what is a question you might want to know, or would you look for? If you were
I
hiring.
think the best question that I think a lot of engineering teams do ask is like either just asking them to talk about a project that they're proud of, like a coding project, or talk about what was a challenging bug or problem that you ran into when doing your project, and how did you overcome it? I think that's genuinely a good question to ask, and I think that's one that a lot of people do ask.
I have a
Oh,
few
go ahead.
things.
Jeremy.
Okay, sorry. I guess two things. Just like kind of the questions in general, about like previous work and then like how that relates to the next, like what you're looking for. Like at every job you're gonna learn skills. So at those jobs, you can try to talk about how those skills are gonna be helpful at the new job you're looking at. So like Emilio, you probably have like a high attention to detail. So that's something you can talk about from your time as a lawyer that is going to be relevant to software development, because that's like a big part of looking at code is like noticing the way things are supposed to be versus the way things are. Um, and that kind of thing, like problem solving skills and that kind of thing is something you're always going to learn. So I think that's always helpful to bring up. And then when I went through the career lab part of TCL, my interviewer was Brian Hogan, and he taught at like night school for people like coding skills, and the goal was to like get them a job, not like that was the focus rather than like the teaching them the coding skills. So it was like getting them up to that point where they were career ready. And he shared this blog post with me that I'm gonna post in chat that has like uh it's about being prepared with stories that you can tell to fit like a variety of questions that are pretty common in interviews. So like when you did an amazing thing at work and received recognition, when you dealt with a difficult coworker, when you were under a lot of pressure, when you had to take charge of something. So like Danielle was saying with like taking initiative, and then like when you failed at work and received feedback on where you can improve, like those are all things that you can prepare stories for beforehand, so you're not thinking of them on the spot, like during the interview itself. Um, which kind of blew my mind when I was like talking to him about it, because like preparing stories isn't even something I had ever considered. Other than like, what got you interested, because that one's so common. But
Yeah, I think I can only speak to my experience working at like smaller, earlier stage startups. A lot of times when people are interviewing, those are like the core people that like build the stuff. So like they're already like very busy. And then on top of that, they have to take time out of their day to do an interview. And I think just from my experience, like as an interviewee, sometimes it's been a little dismaying because it's like I prepared real hard for something, and then you know, some tired overworked engineer joined and like, you know, asked me questions that weren't really good because they had like 5 seconds to figure it out. But I think I don't know. I guess I think just like with that type of mindset, really depends on the company, but like maybe when you think about like answering questions, like a lot of times it's like they want someone who can, you know, hit the ground running and someone who's a good fit and, you know, already knows how to do stuff. Maybe like just really scour like their company page, the job description, and like just kind of phrase the answers to your questions in a way that like conveys like, hey, I know this stuff. If I don't know this stuff, you know, like for example, you know, if they want like, I don't know, Astro or something, you can say like, I don't know Astro, but I know React really well. And here's how I taught myself and I was able to scale up in a week. I can totally do this. Like, yeah, this is kind of more like answers to the other questions. But yeah, it's like as much as you want to like answer the question, like of like, you know, here's why I want to join this company. Like sometimes I try to think about it in a way of like, what do they want to hear? And kind of maybe phrase it that way. But if it's to the point where you're like changing how you're answering it to where like it doesn't feel like you're being true to yourself, like maybe that's not a good job fit. But just kind of stream of consciousness thoughts based off of the questions. But yeah, for a specific question, I think, yeah, right now at my company, we are doing a big conversion to a healthcare spec called FHIR, FHIR. And that probably would be my first question that I would ask someone would be like, what's your experience with this healthcare spec? Just to get very specific. But as an interviewer or someone being interviewed, I think a question that I've been asked a lot that kind of threw me off guard until I knew to prepare ahead, like Jeremiah recommended, was like, tell me about a disagreement that you had with someone, or tell me about a failure that you had. Because sometimes I kind of feel like questions like that are, I don't know if they're like trick questions or, yeah, it's like it could very easily go like in a negative, you know, way. And you don't always want to have that type of attitude at an interview. But yeah, I don't know.
Awesome. Thanks so much, guys.
Okay, if we don't have any other comments on the module, I think is that all we have for this week, guys? I think it is.
I think so. I don't think we've had a discussion since we did the accessibility learning module also, if anybody had questions about that, but other than that, I think we've covered everything.
Cool. Yeah, and I'll put this in writing as always, but this week I'll be doing the GitHub code reviews, so ping me when you're ready. And then Jeremiah will be doing office hours. But otherwise, I think we're all set. I hope you all have a good week and definitely let us know if there's anything we can do to help you out along the way.
Thank you.
Thank you.